Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. So I am from Florida. Florida has embarked on this foster care redesign type road, somewhat similar to what's happening to you and to kids involved in the foster care system here in Texas. I will tell you before I get into any of my slides or discussion that I'm not interested at all in trying to tell you that we have solved things in Florida and you should be like Florida. Texas should be like Texas. Nobody should be like Florida. We don't want the mouse to leave Orlando and come over here to you. We're very happy with the mouse staying right where he is in Orlando. But we have had some similar experiences, have been through some of the same kinds of conversations, and at a minimum, we humbly might submit that there's some things you could learn from maybe our mistakes and or where we tripped into some success and find a way to build on that and do as well as you can for your kids here in Texas in this pilot or project and across the state. So one thing important to know about Florida, similar I think to the big states, we struggle in things related to kids. Florida, as many of you know, had a dramatic population change over a very short period of time, an infrastructure that was really ill-prepared to handle real kinds of situations. It was an extremely rural community until the 60s, till they invented air conditioning and then became much more popular. And we were really known for being pretty dreadful. We had several class action lawsuits. We had federal oversight at one point of Florida's child welfare system. I started professionally with the state when it was a state-driven system. I worked for what is now a long-gone state agency in Florida called HRS, which at its height was one of the largest government agencies in the world, let alone in the country. It has been reorganized a multitude of times and was really pretty dreadful. To no mistake to those of us in there really fighting and struggling to do well by kids, you know, I can tell you that I presided over kids sleeping in conference rooms. I presided over kids sleeping in hotels. I presided over kids sleeping in gymnasiums with sheets in between to separate cots where we were housing them. It was nothing that you would feel good about as somebody who wanted to try to help kids who had some sort of issue in their family and their childhood. And we were generally recognized as one of the worst child welfare systems in the country. We began this sort of idea to move to a community-based model late in the 90s. There was legislation passed that really nobody paid attention to. One of the things that's been lost in the story of Florida's move to a community-based foster care system is it actually began under Governor Lawton Chiles, who was a Democrat. His lieutenant governor was a gentleman named Buddy McKay, who had this crazy idea that we could bring foster care services to the community. I happened to be in way over my head at the time in a conference room when that was discussed as a nutty idea on a whiteboard. And by the mid-2000s, all of Florida's children had been transitioned to community-based lead agencies, geographically similar to what you've pondered here in Texas, geographically spread across the state. My agency actually began in a suburb of Orlando, and we now serve the greater Orlando area as an agency. The way Florida's privatized or community-based foster care system works is that somebody calls the statewide abuse hotline, very, very popular and common across the country. A state employee in Florida, that's the Department of Children and Families. In some instances, it is a sheriff's office employee where they use civilian-trained personnel to go out and conduct that investigation, but somebody other than us conducts an investigation. If they have any sort of finding, in-home, out-of-home, relative, doesn't matter, that case is referred to us and we have full responsibility until the issue is resolved. So that includes in Florida the legal case manager, all of the support services. I say to people frequently, everything from tennis shoes to open heart surgery and everything in between. So we have full responsibility at the point that that case transfers to us until the issue is resolved. That's our design. So as you can tell, there's some differences there, but certainly some parallels that I'll try to draw to in comparison. So we have been involved in this for a little over 10 years, as you can tell from the timeline. And the fact is largely undisputed that children are safer, better cared for, and the system is performing better as a result of Florida's move to community-based care. Our staff are more stable. The social workers and people that work directly with our kids are better trained, and there's more qualified people involved in Florida's foster care system. The same time period, the number of referrals, the intake, that abuse hotline and investigation has steadily climbed as Florida's population has continued to climb. And then we had, as everybody else did, the 2008 to 2011 sort of chaos in the economy that caused a great bit of disruptions. And in the end, we're only 10 years old. I'll speak a little more plainly to that when I get to the real meat and potatoes of the conversation, but 10 years is nothing, I'm sorry to report to you, in this endeavor. So I can back all of that up with very specific statistics that talk to you about what has happened in Florida. The number of kids in the total foster care system has gone from over 50,000 to about 30,000. There are more. We see practically every child every month. We've doubled the number of adoptions in Florida. We now have a child welfare credential, which is done by a state credentialing agency in Florida. So if you think of my name, comma, LCSW, or my name, comma, CPA, or anything else, in Florida we now have a comma, certified dependency case manager, certified licensing worker, things that we can feel proud about. They are my credential that belong to me, and I have met certain competency standards to demonstrate that I know the job and know what I'm doing. It also allowed us to bring ethical standards to the community and revoke places and people that do not meet the standards of that credential, just like any other professional industry. It's one of the intangible items that I feel very proud about in our change. We have more foster homes, more children in foster homes. There's less foster home overcrowding, a dramatic increase in the percentage of children that are served in their home communities, and ultimately lengths of stay have gone down. All of that we were very happy to see compiled in a report that was done by the Foundation for Government Accountability, which looked at foster care systems across America and ranked them on the manner in which they served and protected children. Foundation for Government Accountability is sort of a watchdog group that looks at various government systems. They did a ranking of all 50 states, and Florida ranked 4th in 2012. Those of us involved in Florida's community-based care system say when you update it in 5 years, we'll be number 1. But for somebody who's worked in and around children's issues in Florida for a long time, I've never seen it one digit, right? It's always been 4 and something else. 47, 48, you know, where's Mississippi, or did they include Puerto Rico? Because Florida has historically really been in the category of states that really struggle to take care and protect vulnerable kids. We have not got a rich history of doing that, so it was one of the only times I've ever seen us a single digit in any shape or form, and again, as somebody who's committed a lifetime to trying to help children, was very, very rewarding. So CBC of Central Florida, just very, very quickly, had similar statistics as an agency that serves the Orlando area, which is our geography. Many of the same performance improvements. I'll highlight specifically on this one, placement stability. We have actually only been the lead agency in Orlando proper for 4 years. We've been in some of the suburban areas of Orlando for our complete history, which is now over 10 years. We moved the placement stability in Orlando in 4 years from 77% to 89%. And in Seminole County, which is a suburban area of Orlando where we have been the longest, our placement stability is 92%. It's one of those items that's very important here. As you talk about success in foster care redesign, it's obviously very important to kids, and one that we have held in very high regard as well. And I also would note, Florida is a 4E waiver state. We have one of the most comprehensive 4E waivers, which we've had since 2006, and we have moved millions of dollars from deep end services to the front end. Just in my agency, to the tune of $4 to $5 million moved into diversion, in-home, and reunification style permanency supports and programs and out of deeper end systems. I hope there's no serious representative of the federal government that might wonder if we should continue the waiver. If we lost our waiver in Florida, I'm not really sure what we would do, because it is an integral part of our system now. with the flexibility of use of funds. So in all of that, I'd like to submit to you this afternoon that there are 4 key ingredients into what might make foster care redesign successful for you. Obviously, foster care is a very complicated world that we live in, and success and failure can certainly not be broken down to a dozen or so words, but I would tell you that I think these ingredients should be a bit of the beacon to the conversation as you ponder foster care redesign, and I'll try to submit to you why I believe they are the keys to success. So, first of all, it is critical that we have champions for this change. It is critical that people that care about kids in Texas stand up and talk about the things that we need to accomplish, the manner in which we need to do things differently, and how it is that we should challenge ourselves to do better for our kids. Those things are very critical early on. There will be stumbling blocks, there will be issues. You've had some of that already. And if we believe in what it is we're trying to do, we must have resolve, and we must be willing to stand in those difficult times and say so. And I think those champions are central. It cannot only come from your state agent. It cannot only come from the nonprofit community. They're certainly critical. I understand there is some good support, strong support at the top of the state agency here in the commissioner's office, which I would tell you is invaluable. There were some times early on in Florida we actually had resistance from those senior levels and made things very difficult. So support at that level is terrific. I also think the deep-rooted and community-based nonprofit agencies across Texas are critical to get on board with this idea. Learn about it, study it. If you agree, stand up and say so. But you'll also need other advocates. You'll need the faith community. You'll need elected officials. For us, it ended up being a handful of influential people that just were willing to keep going. And I think one of the 4 components that you must have in order to be successful are these champions for change. They have got to be your reminder about how and why we're doing this. It's important to our kids. We can serve our kids better. It is important for us not to look at our old ways, but to consider new heights that we can reach for them. Second key pillar is the amount of transfer that comes to a community. In America in general, over the last 60 or 70 years, foster kids have been detached from their community. Ward of the state, decisions in far-off lands, decisions from headquarters offices in Washington or in Austin are things that have slowly detached the community from children. One of the things that I think is critical about a community-based design is a reconnection to those communities. You need to have some say over what happens to kids in order to really get change. Now, every community is different. Every state is different. This is a classic place where I would say don't try to suggest you should be Florida, you should be Texas. So what does that mean? What is total transfer? Well, it means something a little different everywhere. And the reality is that the ingredients are a little different and the likelihood of success is a little different depending on what you've got going on. So I would not be overly idealistic about this. Some transfer is okay. From what I have learned about what you are doing here in Texas, you have a lot of responsibility that has come to the community here in this area. And with that, you can do some good things for kids, so do it. And then let's see where that evolves or doesn't based on the successes of the model. But I think return of control to the community and transfer of responsibility matters. And if it's just window dressing, you're really not going to get a lot of change. The financial model is key. Mention 4E and its role in Florida. So long as we finance foster care systems by removing children from their homes, when will we ever solve a problem? And in nonprofits, we've been trained our entire professional lives to say that you have to separate what's good for the budget from what's good for the mission. I would tell you that's ridiculous. And we've got to relearn the fact that what's good for the budget can be good for the mission. What's good for kids can be good for the budget. And that's the way in which we should design financial models. Our design specifically in Florida, we get one global transfer of funds and we must serve all comers. So if there's more kids, we do not get more money. If there are less kids, we do not get less money. So if we can prevent kids from being abused, if we can resolve issues, if we can reunify or adopt children, and we can bring permanency to their life and make that successful for them, it is tremendously good for kids, and it's tremendously good for the budget. Now, there's a lot of steps from here to there. That model evolved dramatically over our 10-year, now a little bit longer history. But we have to stop accepting our captor that says you have to work the mission and budget in opposite directions. And there's no better example in my mind than 4E, where the federal government says, I will help you so long as you remove a child from their home. There are lots of other scenarios where we can help children, where we don't have to remove them. Or once we find some permanency road, we would like to continue to help them, and the finance model does not do so. I would also highlight very specifically, especially for those of you looking to be involved as a community provider partner, risk takes on many new shapes in a foster care redesign kind of form. Risk is a many, many splendor thing. We've been conditioned most frequently to think about risk to say, what's the risk that something bad might happen to a kid? And what's the risk that I might be in the paper? I'd like us to spend much more attention on what's the risk of not doing the right thing? What's the risk of not taking a chance on a kid in order to help them succeed? If you think of the kinds of things that we don't allow to happen for our kids in foster care, classic example being driving. Driving is risky. Teenage driving is very risky. Are we really helping our foster children by saying, you can't drive? Or are we hurting them more than helping them? We can make sure nothing bad happens to them by putting them in a little white square room and feeding them meals every day. That's not the kind of system I'd like to be a part of. No risk, no reward. I am far more likely today to take a big risk to do the right thing than I ever was 15 years ago to take a risk that something bad might happen. Sometimes something bad might happen because that's the nature of kids. We've got to stand for what's right, and we've got to do what's right for our kids so that they have a chance to succeed and thrive. Those ought to be the kind of discussions we're having. Some of that may end up being financial risk. Some of that may be a risk to my traditional programming. It might be a risk to start something new. Those are important risks if we're going to get change. And I think the finance model as it relates to incentives and it relates to risk are key in foster care redesign. Without them, you won't have change. And lastly, that staple that I started with throughout this discussion, we've got to reconnect kids to the community. Foster kids need to be connected to their community. It took 50 years to disconnect them. It will take time to reconnect them. It's a long, long road. I will tell you that we frequently lament that people still see the state agent, the Department of Children and Families in Florida, as who's responsible for kids. Especially in the media, it's what they know. They don't quite understand what's changed. So you still get, the state did this or the department did that, and those things are frustrating. But it's only been 10 years. If we're still having that discussion 10 more years or 20 more years from now, then I'll maybe start to think about I need to quit. But until then, we'll keep fighting. And the reality is, foster kids are not these kids, they're not those kids, they're our kids. I say frequently when I go out and speak in my community, if I stand in my ordinary Central Florida driveway of my ordinary Central Florida home, I can point to a foster home, I can point to an adoptive home, and I can point to a home where children have been removed. And I bet it's true of most of us. We just don't know it. Foster kids sit beside our children in school. They are around us. They're part of our community, and we owe it to them to help to take care of them. We've been out there fighting as advocates and members of our various disciplines in child welfare and child protection. We need the rest of the community to come with us. A state-driven system doesn't allow that. A community-based model does, and I think it's integral if you're going to get success. I think these four components are linked. If you remove any one of them or imbalance any one of them, I think you get less change. I think you have to find the moments where they may conflict with each other, and you need to resolve that conflict. You need to find the times when they complement each other, and you need to accelerate that complement. But I would submit to you these major categories are the factors you need to contemplate when you think about foster care redesign, and you need to push in your own scope and span of responsibility in order to be successful. So what will this mean to you? Everything will change is what it means for you. Now, that happens over time, but the relationships will change. The thinking of authority changes in the system. The manner in which you succeed or fail will change. And in that, some really wonderful things start to happen. One is there's tremendous opportunity. And there's a chance where you've been frustrated by a chronic issue that holds back your success or success for your kids to break that down. And there's opportunities abound to get out and do the kinds of things that we wish we can do for kids. And I would tell you in bold, bold, bold letters, it allows us to focus on kids. Don't focus on the policy. Don't focus on the adults. Don't focus on bureaucracies or rules or anything else. Design a system for kids. And if nothing else, is it not worth doing in an effort to do that? And if you think candidly about our systems, how frequently is that not what we're talking about? Way too often. Way too often. And maybe some of the loudest advocates on behalf of kids are the ones getting pushed down or getting squelched or silenced or seen as a rabble-rouser rather than celebrated for the fact that they're really being a strong advocate for kids. The system should promote that, and I think this provides you that opportunity for change. We now are almost 11 years old as an agency, and we look nothing like we looked like when we started. Nothing. So we've seen tremendous outcomes. Some of them we really shot off to, and we saw some really dramatic improvements early, and often. Others have been a real slow grind, really difficult to overcome. Give you one specific example. One of our rural communities outside of Orlando, we want to serve more of our kids in that community. It's been hard to solve. And we're going at it today as aggressively as we were going at it 10 years ago, and it's still hard. And that's okay. And we'll continue to try to solve the issues that are holding us back, and we'll continue to try to work with that community to make things different. We've dramatically increased and improved our programs for foster kids. We've dramatically diversified our funding sources, bringing new and integrated funding into the foster care system that we never pondered when we first started. For example, we now are a partner in Florida's Medicaid managed care as it relates to kids in foster care. Here in Texas, that's Superior, which is a subsidiary of Centene. In Florida, it's Sunshine, which is a subsidiary of Centene, and we are their business partner. We work with them in making decisions. We work with them in designing the system. We have a role in coordinating care for our kids, and we openly share information about what's happening in Medicaid with the child welfare industry. I would have never dreamed of that 10 years ago, and it's a terrifically better system for kids than we had then. So really good things can evolve over the course of this journey if you open yourself up for the opportunity. And we have ultimately completely changed our structure and now actually operate as a family of companies. I share this with you for no other reason than just to tell you that we've evolved. And because I used it as an example, the one blue circle over there is an entity called Community-Based Care Integrated Health, which is the partnership with the Superior equivalent. Never in a million years would we have thought this is the path that we would end up on, but we were willing to go down that journey, focus on kids, and I believe very much to my core, foster care redesign matters to kids. It can make the system better for kids abused, neglected, and abandoned in Texas, and I think you should try it. And I think if you do, and the good, strong advocates, workers, administrators, government employees, leaders, and et cetera in Texas can make a better system than the one that we've accepted over the past 40 or 50 years. And I think it's worth doing. I encourage you to take the journey. It's hard, but it's awful rewarding. So, any questions?